you are free to go out, and if you want to protest and you are free to do it, absolute rubbish. You will recall that as it relates to social media, when they were in opposition, they spoke about the People's National Movement, deliberately restricting the freedom of speech of several citizens. But here it is, that they are now locking up people and putting them behind bars. And with the state of emergency, you have absolutely no opportunity to see the light of day. Maybe after the state of emergency is over. So I wanted to start to say to the people of Trinidad and Tobago that you now have the opportunity to compare. You must remember that it is very easy to use rhetoric and say to the public, when UNC wins, everybody wins. Promise made, promise delivered. To the public servants, to say to them that you will get all that is due to you. And when the time comes, what do? You only give it to a selected group of people. Remember what I just said, for everybody, and that is not the case. So I start with those opening remarks, and my other colleagues will speak, and then I will speak again at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Opposition Leader, for those salient points that set the tone for so many of the things that we are going to be addressing today. Up next, we welcome Member of Parliament for Laventille East Morvant, the Honourable Christian Birchwood, who's actually celebrating his birthday today. MP Birchwood.
Thank you, MP. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank the political leader and all other members of our leadership team for arranging this conversation with the People's National Movement and the population. I'd also like to thank the media for taking the time to come here today, and to all other listening members via social media and other platforms. Thank you all for logging in. I'd like to start with some quotes, some very familiar quotes. Some of these officers seem to be on a power trip, bullying and abusing citizens regularly. There are many videos on the internet of officers harassing drivers with no basis in law. They insult and abuse drivers in front of their families. These officers must be reprimanded for their abusive behaviors towards the public. Now, this is a blatant attack on our very hardworking members of the police service who may have been executing their duties through the course of the day. Another quote: "We cannot ignore the licensing authorities' heavy-handed tactics. We have turned our roads into battlegrounds of daily roadblocks and traffic jams. This is not about road safety. It is yet another tax drive by the government using the licensing authority to raise revenue." Another unwarranted attack on our hardworking citizens. And finally, a UNC government will reduce traffic fines across the board and implement state-sponsored driver education programs instead. Well, there's no surprise as to who made these remarks. This was made by our current Prime Minister, Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessar. This was made, and she was the then opposition leader of the United National Congress in April of this year, a mere 5 days before the general election, on a platform in Princestown. And if we take this into contrast in relation to what is happening today, it is, well, with respect to the traffic fines and how they are now doubled, heavy jail time allotment for particular road safety violations, it's safe to say that the Kamala Persad-Bissessar of today is not the same Kamala Persad-Bissessar 8 months ago, maybe even a year. And this government has basically proven that they cannot be trusted. And this is said on the basis that their leader and several other members of her cabinet, they have severe issues with regards to being truthful, being ethical, being accountable, and most importantly, being transparent. The entire country has several question marks with respect to many of the decisions they have been making over the past couple of months. Now, if we look at where we are today with this current government and we contrast that with the PNM and their policies with respect to road safety, the PNM's policies has always been very clear, probably since 2017. Their policies are geared towards greater and stronger traffic measures to help with behavioral modification. And this is primarily to get people home safely. And this is the objective here, ladies and gentlemen. The objective is to get people home safely. And PNM would have identified this because road fatalities worldwide, the burdens that they provide to families is unmeasurable. One life lost to any accident is something that is irreplaceable, right? And we took that very important, especially where the mental impact takes place. There are many families who, after suffering losses, or even family members that may have been injured mentally, it's daunting to deal with, financially as well. And the systems that the PNM government would have put in place, that led to a 50% decrease in fatalities. And what this would prove is that the measures that the PNM would have taken, they were actually working. They were working, they were measured, they were fair, and they were transparent. That is a very key word. They were transparent. And this, ladies and gentlemen, was reinforced by data provided by Arrive Alive, which is our main road safety NGO. And they link that success to a number of different measures. One being seatbelt and helmet reinforcement for our motorcyclists, breathalyzer laws, public education, which is something I believe this government is failing at repeatedly. They have made no allotment in their budget to formally address the country and educate them with respect to the importance of being safe on our nation's roads. And another element highlighted by our NGO is the introduction of the demerit point system with traffic cameras. Now, if we are thinking that it's only our local bodies that has confirmed our competence with respect to, and our successes, I should say, with respect to road safety, the World Health Organization has also highlighted factors that contributed to the deduction of road fatalities and well dangerous and reckless driving on the roads in general. And it is indeed noteworthy that the World Health Organization and Arrive Alive, they identified major solutions to curb reckless driving, and they were all present in these systems implemented by the last administration. This is evident as, there was a notable deduction, 31% to be exact, in road fatalities in the first quarter of this year as compared to the first quarter, the same period in 2024. And what did we witness in a very short order? The Prime Minister, after assuming position, she did not seek to complement or improve these systems that were already working or being looked at as successful. And I say it was being successful because it directly saved lives. Remember, this is our metric. How many lives are saved on the road? She effectively disrupted the systems that were working. And based on her messaging before and throughout her campaign this year, it resulted in the immediate hike of road fatalities. The population, they completely took into consideration her very callous remarks and statements with respect to the demerit point system, and a lot of lives were lost. That, in my opinion, hangs squarely on the shoulders of the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. And to speak quite plainly, the issue of the day is the increase in these fines, the doubling of these fines, which essentially did not have to happen because these international bodies have all made mention to the fact that steeper fines or higher fines do not result in saving lives. She essentially implemented these fines in an economy that has contracted over the last 8 months. And now with this contraction taking place, where oil prices are now low, our number one revenue earner, this is now on the backs, on the burdens. The citizenry of Trinidad and Tobago we now have to bear that load. Right? So people facing these loads, given the economic challenges that we're experiencing, many of which created by the wave of firings that occurred over the last 8 months. I'm very curious as to how and why the Prime Minister thinks it fit to double these prices, or these fines, and so mysterious in the middle of the night, Christmas Day. This Prime Minister even went on to describe this great nation, this wonderful nation, this prideful nation, as a lawless dump. Well, I'm saying here today, Madam Prime Minister, on behalf of my constituents as well, on behalf of the People's National Movement, if you believe that this place is truly a dump, then I beg you, relinquish your position as Prime Minister and go where you believe a palace exists. Because I can tell you for a fact, this nation will be fine. We will be good. It seems like your objective since taking office has been to degrade the good people of the Caribbean. And I believe it's Trinidad's turn, apparently, based on your very callous remarks. But once there is air in my lungs, I can tell you for a fact, no remark like that would go without a rebuttal. It is unnecessary, and as a leader, you are required to be careful with your words. Your words are heavy, and you have a responsibility to speak light and be patriotic as the Prime Minister. And as you could probably tell, I took extreme offense to that, because this alleged dump, took this orphan, who never lived a day without his mother or his father, gave him a warm meal when the day came, in the form of a box lunch, went as far as to put him through school, from primary all the way to tertiary for free. And today he stands as a member of parliament for the very same constituency that took care of him when he needed that care. And there are many like me scattered all across the country. And what we are living, what I am living, is the Trinbago dream. So, Mrs. Prime Minister, please be careful. This dump, Madam Prime Minister, was recognized by the World Health Organization as one of only 10 countries in the world to achieve a 50% reduction in road traffic deaths during the decade of action for road safety in 2011 to 2020. And I will remind you, Madam Prime Minister, that while we do have our challenges like the rest of the world does, our challenges do not make us a dump. But I can understand why the Prime Minister will go as far as to use these empty platitudes. It is merely and will always be a distraction, specifically for this topic that I'm speaking on. These road traffic fines and the increases, the doubling of these fines. It's a distraction because these measures are punitive, they are harsh, they are unnecessary, and they are impractical. I even raised this in Parliament, and I used that general example of a fine between $20,000 to $40,000 to a low-income household, and how that by itself can be similar to a financial death sentence. And what happened when I did that? The goodly finance minister, he went on to say that I was implying that people from Lavantilles Mova are lawbreakers. I think it would have been easier for him to say that they did not cater for people whom may have just been experiencing difficulties, because we are living in a world where people are not perfect. A lot of things happen. You cannot expect for everybody in the country to be perfect. And it seems as if these lawmakers right now, this government, I believe that they have had access to private drivers for a little too long, because somehow it may have made them insensitive to the man on the ground. Because if you're thinking that it's only $20,000 or $20,000 or $40,000 fine can affect a low-income household, think again, Mr. Finance Minister. Because for a low-income family, a $2,000 fine for a blown taillight or expired document, that isn't a lesson either. That by itself can make the difference between if somebody eats or if they don't eat. And that is a fact. So imagine not knowing that your driver's permit may be expired for a week or two, or maybe you're not aware that your insurance may be up to renew, and you suffer a major blow financially. And given the current state of the economy, with these massive firings, people are here looking and searching to do the best that they can to survive and to provide for their families, only to be hit with double the amount of penalties and road fines. I don't think that to be fair, not at all. So, I believe this government, even if they want to enforce laws, they should look within themselves, because there are two known ministers who cannot help but blog while driving. So fix internally before you come at the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Without seatbelts. So to wrap up, I believe my leader would have mentioned in a post a couple of days ago that these fines, they must be reversed. The average man, they cannot be expected to foot your political promises. You, the government, you must be expected to execute your promises through sound governance and not off the backs of the lower class working people or the poor class people of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, MP Birchwood, for highlighting the more slogans and fewer solutions by our current government, and the fact that they govern for the headlines, not for the hard work. And it is the PNM that will fix the country, as has always been done. Up next, we welcome Senator Dr. the Honorable Amory Brown to touch on some other matters. Senator Brown.
Thank you very much, MP Hans de Veens. I want to recognize our leader of the opposition and the political leader of the People's National Movement, the Honorable Penelope Beckles Robinson, also MP Colm Imbert, and my brother, who really spoke from the heart this morning, also celebrating his birthday, MP Christian Birchwood. I hope his words would have resonated with the hearts and minds of the population today. He had a very important message. Well, we're still in the Christmas season, in that sort of lacuna period between Christmas and New Year's. And this is still considered a season of love and peace and goodwill and glad tidings and generosity. Unfortunately, the government of the day and the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago has also seen a different kind of opportunity in this period, where it has surreptitiously introduced into this country a number of new developments, including the fines, penalties, and taxes that have been referenced by MP Birchwood and will be elaborated further, but also some new language. They've taken this period to introduce some new language into the lexicon of Trinbagonians. One of those phrases is to describe this proud, independent, sovereign nation as a lawless dump. As a citizen myself and a member of this opposition, I take strong objection to that description of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. It is now my view that Kamla Persad-Bissessar has established herself as the worst prime minister in the history of this proud nation. On his worst day in office, the Honorable A.N.R. Robinson would have given this country far better than Kamla Persad-Bissessar has given in 8 months. On his worst day in office, the great Patrick Augustus Mervyn Manning would have given this nation far better than Kamla Persad-Bissessar. On his worst day in office, the Honorable Keith Christopher Rowley would have given this nation better value than the current Prime Minister. On his worst day in office, Basdeo Panday, the founder of the UNC, would have given this nation more value than the current Prime Minister. The same applies to our first Prime Minister, Dr. Eric Eustace Williams, and interestingly,
billion there as well. So I suspect the budget for deficit for this year will be somewhere between $7 and $10 billion, not the $3 billion that the minister spoke about. But that's just one thing. You will have seen that new national insurance contribution rates are going to kick in from next week. And I did a little calculation because I think it's important. The PSA was quite happy that they got their 10% increase, which they haven't got yet, by the way. Public servants are told they will now get it in 2026. January, maybe February, who knows. What they got in December was an advance on their back pay, a small advance. But I've done a calculation. I am familiar with public servant salaries. So let's take a typical public servant salary, around $10,000 per month. And I'm actually using a figure of $9,800 to bring it in line with national insurance contribution and benefit rates, the schedule. In 2025, the person getting $9,800 a month, the public servant, paid $431 a month in NIS contributions. Next week, that will go to $529 a month. And in January of 2027, it will go to $627 a month, an increase of $196 a month, or $200. What that does to the 10% increase, it immediately knocks 2% out of the 10%. So with the national insurance increases, public servants will effectively not be getting a 10% increase in take-home pay. They'll get an 8% increase because they now have to pay far more national insurance. And then you have the whole question of retirement age. It's not in law yet, but it's a stated intention in the budget statement that from 2028, if you retire at 60, you're going to start to get a reduced pension. You will no longer get $3,000 a month from NIS. What I find interesting about all of this is, let's take the PSA in particular. I don't hear a word from them, not a word. When we were in government and we floated the idea of increasing the retirement age to 65, using consultation as the process, the PSA howled and shouted and screamed and said they will never accept that, they will go to court. Now the UNC has announced it's going to increase the retirement age to 65, reducing the pension that you would get at age 60. And, or actually they haven't announced that. They've announced that you will not get $3,000 at age 60. You'll now have to wait until you're 65 to get that. If you retire at 60, you get less. And they've increased national insurance rates. I haven't heard a word from the Public Service Association. Additionally, in the budget, in the fiscal measures of the Minister of Finance, he said this: in keeping with the government's promise during the 2025 election campaign, I propose that private pensions be exempted from income tax. These amendments will take effect on January the 1st, 2026, which is Thursday or Friday, I think, this week. Now, the only way private pensions can be exempted from income tax is if the law is amended to make that possible. We had a Finance Act in the Parliament a couple of weeks ago, and I've gone through this Finance Act, and I have not seen any adjustment to the Income Tax Act to exempt private pensions from tax. It's not there. So it's not going to happen on January the 1st, 2026. Pensioners will continue to pay tax on their pensions once they are above the personal allowance. In addition, why single out private pensions? What about public service pensions? Because that's the promise that the UNC made, that public servants would not have to pay tax on their pensions. But in the minister's statement, he says it only relates to private pensions, and then he didn't do it. The other strange thing in this Finance Act is that adjustments were made to the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act and so on. Just a few. Increasing the fines for driving without a permit and so on. But what we actually saw a few days ago, when I look at it, maybe about 4 or 5 adjustments in all are in the Finance Act to the fines and penalties in the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act. But when I look, what do I see? I see using a vehicle in defective condition, fine gone from 1,000 to 2,000. Improper use of dealer's license, 1,000 to 2,000. Motorcycle without helmet, 1,000 to 2,000. Driver not wearing seat belt, 1,000 to 2,000, and so on. Mr. Birchwood spoke about the tail light now. How do you know whether your tail light is working or not? Obviously, somebody behind you had to tell you, so that an average person will not know that the tail light is not working. But this government has decided $2,000 for that. Seat belt. I remember years ago, I did an interview on Morning Edition. This is many years ago, about 20 years. And I coming out the car park downtown and putting on my seatbelt as I come out the car park. I ain't reached the road yet, with wheels on the pavement, just crossing the entrance. Policeman say, hey, $1,000. Stand up there waiting for me. $1,000. I ain't reached the road yet. I decided not to challenge it. I said, look, I don't have time for that. To go to court, and say this is a crazy policeman and so on. I paid the fine. $2,000 now for that. Okay? And with respect to the demerit points, it works. I know many people who got demerit points for simple little things. You're in a 30-mile-an-hour zone or 50 kilometers an hour zone. It's very easy to get up to 55 kilometers an hour. That's just about 33 miles an hour. That's easy. You could be driving at 49 kilometers an hour and just touch the X or something and you get up to 55. It happens to anyone. The demerit points system dealt with that. I know people who got demerit points and were very careful after that. They're looking at the speed limit, they're looking at the speedometer, and they're making sure they're inside there. Okay? Because when the demerit points accumulated, sooner or later you're going to lose your license, which is a serious matter. but a fine. The traffic courts are clogged up with thousands and thousands, maybe about 5 or 10,000 traffic matters inside of there. Some of these matters don't ever get called. There's so many of them inside of there. So what's going to happen here? This is not going to be a deterrent for lawlessness. People just wouldn't pay. And they'll go in the court and argue and fight up, right? And the policeman has to come, and give evidence and say, yes, I saw this fellow not wearing his seatbelt and so on. And half the time the police don't show up. They have many more important things to do. This doesn't make any sense. The merit point system is a proven, internationally recognized way of dealing with deterrence against reckless driving. This is just foolish. And I mean, I don't have to repeat what my colleagues have said, that the Prime Minister promised to reduce fines. I don't have to repeat that. I mean, when I look at what is going on, it is just shocking. In this Finance Act, for example, in addition to doubling the taxes on alcohol, they also put in a tax on brewers. Brewers are beer. The more beer you brew, now they put in a duty on that, based on volume. Where do these things come from? Nobody voted for that. Nobody who voted for the UNC voted for that. That you'll get a landlord tax, you'll get an electricity tax, you'll get a brewing tax, you'll get a tax on plastics. I mean, all of these things are going to kick in within the next week or so. The landlord tax in particular is particularly ridiculous, I think is the best way I need to describe it. There are about 600,000 properties in Trinidad. This landlord tax applies to all of them, whether it's industrial, residential, or commercial. All. There's no threshold. Everybody had to pay. As distinct from the property tax, where you had to register at least 50% of the properties in a particular category before you were allowed to impose the tax. This landlord tax, they have no threshold. Pay right away. The criteria, they haven't been published. How does a landlord know what to do? Because when you look in the law, it says the Board of Inland Revenue will publish certain forms. I also saw something in the law, it's just bad law, because it says that you have to fill out this form, you're a landlord, you have to go and register, you pay a one-time registration fee of $2,500. But it also says that if the arrangement between the landlord and the tenant comes to an end, your registration is cancelled. Now think about it. Everybody who rents a property to somebody, there's a timeline and all of that. You might rent a property for a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever. A lease will always has a term in it. So I rent a property to somebody for a year. At the end of the year, it comes to an end. This law says that once the agreement between the landlord and the tenant terminates by agreement, well, we've agreed because you signed a lease with me. You agree to pay the rent. I agree to rent you the place. I agree I rent you for 1 year. At the end, it comes to an end by agreement. It says your registration is cancelled. But you have to go and register again. Pay an next $2,500. This law can't work. This cannot work. It's nonsense. And furthermore, let's say out of that 600,000 properties in Trinidad and Tobago, 100,000 are rented. I'm just using a figure. How on earth within the next 3 months, because it says people have to go and register within the next 3 months. After that is jail, It's 3 years in jail, Under the Property Tax Act, there was a fine of $5,000 for not paying your property tax. Under this act, it's $250,000 and 3 years jail if you don't go and register. And then if your tenant changes and you don't inform the Board of Inland Revenue within 30 days, jail. How on earth is the Board of Inland Revenue going to manage 100,000 properties in Trinidad and Tobago, rental properties? How are you going to pay? You're paying in cash? You're paying by check? You're paying online? Are they set up to do that? And there's another part in there that says that if you get rent in US dollars, you fall within. How are you paying that rent? In US dollars? How are I paying US dollars to the Board of Inland Revenue? How are I doing that? Go to the bank and get it, and give it to them? What do I do? Do I do a transfer? Because as far as I know, you can only transfer US dollars to the Board of Inland Revenue through the central bank, through a very complicated system. Yeah, nonsense law. And I am certain adjustments will be made to this. I am certain it's not going to work. And my question is, whose bright idea was this? I looked at all of this. I remember in 2016 when I had the first Article 4 consultation with the IMF, because that's supposed to be an annual thing. So IMF came in 2016, I was Minister of Finance, we stood down there with the team, and we're talking about the fact that there's been a decline in revenue because of a collapse of oil prices. Oil prices had gone from $100 in 2014 down to $25 in February of 2016. And we're talking about, well, things bad, you know, we've lost $15 billion in revenue. Actually, I'd lost $20 billion in annual revenue at one point in time. And the IMF guy says, well, yes, increase tax. I say, what? He said, yes, man, just tax them, man. Put tax on alcohol, put tax on cigarette, increase income tax. I said, He said, yes, that's what we're supposed to do. But we didn't do that, okay? It is clear to me you're dealing with a set of amateurs. I'm sorry to use this word. And they just go on and they talk to some IMF consultant or somebody and they say, this is why you come up with all this rubbish. Because where on earth have all these taxes come from? And you see, I hate to repeat what the Prime Minister has said, but I have to repeat it. I remember Ms. Besessa saying that you can't tax a nation into prosperity. Those were her words. And for that reason, after we had stabilized the economy, I stopped increasing taxes. In the budget of 2023, the budget of 2024, 2025, I stopped and I said no more taxes, no more increases in taxes. And I kept that promise, okay? They promised to reduce. I stopped increasing. They said they will reduce. What they do, they double tax, they add more tax, they dream up new tax. It doesn't make any sense. All you're going to have is tax evasion. The Board of Inland Revenue is not equipped to deal with this. It is not. So I don't know where Trinidad and Tobago is going with these amateurs. I just don't know. I don't understand the political perspective in all of this, because nobody's happy about this. Who will be happy about paying all these increased taxes? Customs gone up, electricity surcharge, landlord surcharge, alcohol gone up, NIS gone up. Nobody going to be happy. Where's the politics in all of this? I just don't understand it. All right? So I would stop now because I could talk for about 2 hours on this. Okay, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, the Honorable Coleman Burt, Member of Parliament for Diego Martin North East. There are a few other matters that need to be touched on by the opposition leader, so we're going to welcome our opposition leader and Member of Parliament for Arima, the Honorable Penelope Beckles Robinson, once again.
Okay, thank you again, everyone. I did indicate that I will have just a few more things to say at the end. I started off by expressing condolences to the family of Gideon Smart. I now have to express condolences to the family of Bruce Lizama, a constituent of mine, from Bypasser Road, Arima. So you may or may not know that his body was found. And I mean, I know Mr. Lizama, and the unfortunate thing, I spoke a while ago about the state of emergency, and notwithstanding this state of emergency, that this government indicated that you would see a drastic reduction in crime and murder and other related activities. The CCTV footage was able to show persons abducting him from his home, subsequently withdrawing money from his bank account, and then dumping his body on the Blanchisseuse Road. You also would recall that a couple of days ago as well in my constituency, 2 persons were killed. So I also want to express condolences to the family. Miss Lindsay, the mother who I know personally, and the 2 young men who died as well, who were murdered, I actually had seen them just the week before. So you could quite well imagine what a challenge it is for me and for the family of those persons and the many other persons who have been killed during this year. So the other matters that I wanted to raise has to do with the HDC and the fact that the chairman, Mr. Feroz Khan, indicated that the board took a decision to regularize squatters occupying HDC buildings. The media interviewed both the Prime Minister and the Minister. The Minister made it very clear he's not aware of any such policy. He was not consulted on any such policy. The Prime Minister indicated when she was asked about it that they should talk to the chairman. On such an important matter, we really ask, who's really running the country? The minister doesn't know about it, the Prime Minister doesn't know about it, and of course later on when they call the chairman, he's not answering. And many persons in the public domain, those who have been occupying HDC buildings unlawfully, of course, were very happy of hearing about this decision. And within less than a day, the minister said, listen, I don't know nothing about that. And the Prime Minister couldn't help. And I'm calling on the government to please clarify this matter, because what you have now put in the public domain is causing a lot of confusion. And the person from the Newsday who did the interview said, well, what about the people who are, paying their mortgage? What about those who are waiting in line? And what really is the signal that the government is sending to the people of Trinidad and Tobago? The same government who said that they will be delivering 500 houses a week, and we are yet to see them deliver on those 500 houses. What exactly are they saying to the public as it relates to this matter? This, of course, is consistent with other chairmen saying one thing and a minister saying something else, or a minister saying one and the Prime Minister. You would have heard it as it relates to foreign policy, as it relates to Venezuela. And even on the cultural issue, where, if I can use an example, NGC, cutting funding for steel bands, and the minister said, don't worry, I will be having discussions with the NGC and with Pan Trinbago, and we're still waiting. Because the chairman said, well, we have lost $1 billion. And of course, like everything else, they want to give the impression, well, the People's National Movement would have been, assisting all these steel bands when these these multiplicity of organizations were not making money. So the question, they're really putting us on notice about Carnival 2026 and where the government's head is as it relates to culture. Because on the one hand, the Prime Minister gets up one morning and say, no more fete in Brian Lara. You talk about noise pollution, you talk about, fireworks, and you all saw what happened as it relates to all that is going on. And we are waiting very patiently to hear what is the government's plans for Carnival. The government knew very well that a number of fete promoters had already paid on Brian Lara, on the Brian Lara facility, and it is not as though if you are saying, okay, this facility is for cricket and therefore we don't want any, but they weren't using the ground, they were using the car park. So what is your alternative? We are waiting very patiently. Carnival is just 6 weeks away, and Carnival is known to be one of the greatest activities on earth, one of the important cultural activities in Trinidad and Tobago for our tourism sector and for many of the small businesses who are waiting patiently, having recognized that traditionally we have developed your all-inclusive, where many people coming from abroad would have already purchased their tickets, paid for their costumes, only to find out now that the tax is on virtually everything. But we await very patiently for the Minister of Culture to give us her announcement as it relates to that. The other two matters very quickly in relation to Tobago has to do with the sea bridge and the disruption where the TNT Spirit has now been pulled out of service, of course joining the ATP James, which is on dry dock, and to ask the government to give a clear indication to the people of Tobago as it relates to the time frame for the repair of these boats, because we know very well how important it is for travel from Tobago. And my final really has to do with the radar, which is still a very important and relevant issue. We are still waiting to hear the truth about the radar. We have had many stories, whether it is that you were going to fix the road, whether was it a secret, whether it was that you decided that for national security reasons you did not inform the chief secretary. The Prime Minister is yet to address the country on this matter in a way in which the people of Trinidad and Tobago can clearly understand what really is the purpose of the radar and why did you place it in Tobago? Why not somewhere else? And we know very well that the Joint Chief of Staff visited Trinidad and Tobago just a few days before, and then eventually pressuring the Prime Minister indicated that the Prime Minister requested the radar. Now, the Prime Minister was tell us why she requested the radar. It may very well be that she has a good reason. We just don't know the reason. And more so because the Minister of Homeland Security and the Commissioner of Police made it very clear that that radar was assisted them in detecting drugs that was found in the Caroni Swamp. Now, the interesting thing about it is whilst the radar helped them to discover the drugs, the radar ain't discover nobody that put the drugs there. So we are waiting very patiently, because at the end of the day, what the people of Trinidad and Tobago want is accountability. We want that those who do the crime must do the time. But if it is that we find out that when they discover the drugs, anyone who has been watching any movie or whatever it is, at least you will lie in wait, since you now have technology to help you. You would lie in wait for those who are either coming for it or those who left it there, only to discover that people were afraid of mosquitoes. Yes, mosquitoes. Just remember that. I did not invent that story. They said that they did not want the police to go there and be bitten by mosquitoes. I'm not sure how they were able to move the drugs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Opposition Leader. We will now open the floor for questions. We actually will have the microphone circulating, and you all can feel free to answer questions. We'll start with Ryan Hamilton Davis from Newsday, and what you can do, you can identify who you would like to address your question to.
Okay, I want to start with the opposition leader. You hearing me, right?
Yes,
Yeah, okay, sorry. Well, just to start with well, I think one of the larger topics of the day, the comments by the Prime Minister. Other Prime Ministers, given even more higher crime rates, we have figures to show that there has been reduced crime rates. They have made commentary on the state of crime and criminality in Trinidad and Tobago. Maybe not as classy as TT is a dump, a lawless dump, but they have been made significant comments on these situations. And I mean, the thread is still there that there is a major concern, and there is high crime, and there is a challenge in seeing what can be done about it. All right. So, as the opposition, number one is your opinion on the crime situation right now? You had to mention 2 crimes while you were just speaking there. What is your mention on? Yeah. What is your relation on crime and criminality in Trinidad and Tobago? And as far as how we can move forward as a nation to get out of that situation.
Well, the opposition has maintained our position that, crime is everybody's issue. I mean, and I started talking about that. And we obviously have a concern. If you recall that a multiplicity of legislation was passed by the People's National Movement, and you would also recall that the opposition did not support, or the opposition at the time did not support a lot of those pieces of legislation. You remember the bail. I mean, you know, that piece of legislation where persons who were on bail, and the last time that was taken to Parliament, we did not get their support. You know, so the truth is that we are not denying that we don't have a problem in criminal. I mean, I can go to the list of things that we have done in the number of new judges, the number of new registrars, the establishment of virtual courts, the changing of the law, you know, so that the whole issue of the preliminary inquiries, you know, removing that. So there's a multiplicity of interventions, but we also understand that crime is not an easy issue to tackle, and Trinidad and Tobago is not isolated in that sense. I mean, it's everyone, you know, there are very few countries in the world who will say that they're not able to deal with crime. So it's the intervention is education, the intervention is social issues. So when you talk about crime, and the government gave the impression that once the state of emergency was implemented and further extended, then you would see this great reduction in crime. But the state of emergency by itself cannot help in terms of addressing the crime issue. And you would recall that under the People's National Movement, we also had a state of emergency. So it's not a question where we would say that is not one form of intervention, but that by itself clearly would not address the issue. And we have asked the government, what is the alternative? And also, what are your additional interventions? Because the state of emergency is due to end, as I said, sometime end of January, beginning of February. What happens after that? So yes, this government is going to tell you that the last time they were in office, they had a state of emergency, and what they will do very skillfully, show you the data, and the data will say that in the last 10 years when the PNM was in office, and as it relates to the murders, you had X. We come into office in April, a state of emergency, and at the end of 2025, you show the data to say you have this reduction. But it's not as simple as that. So and even this stand your ground legislation that they passed, and when you go through that stand your ground, where they have led the public to believe that once somebody attacks you, even if they turn their back, it's that, you know, I mean, you still have to go to court. You still have to go through the normal process of the police taking statements, giving evidence, and you still have the issue of having to prove your innocence. So as a country, we have had this issue to deal with. It's all about, as well, our borders. I mean, when the government came into effect, came into power, I think it was in 2010, they cancelled the OPVs, the blimp, right? And a number of interventions that were put in place, because to a large extent you're talking about improved technology, you're talking about increasing a number of courts, you're talking about the police service. So there's a multiplicity, and we were not perfect, but the truth is that when you look at the multiplicity of legislation that was passed, when you look at the legislation, all of that, I would say a plan was there. Clearly, and consistently, whenever we get into office, their call is always the state of emergency.
Question before I pass the mic to someone else. As far as there is one gauge in determining crime as and the fear of criminality, while the numbers says something, one thing, the fear and the fear of crime is also a key indicator as far as how things are. As a citizen and as opposition leader, do you, number one, as a citizen yourself, feel that your fear and your perception of crime or worsened perception of crime?
Well, I mean, as I'm a member of parliament, so I can also speak as a member of parliament. And they tell you continuously that they are genuinely concerned. I mean, people continue to be in fear. And, I mentioned that in visiting the United States a couple of months ago, and in having a meeting with members of the diaspora, I mean, people express concern. Unlike other countries that do not put crime on the front page, on the second page, and the third page every day, you do have a situation where that is how Trinidad and Tobago is portrayed. And then you also have the situation where about coming to Trinidad and Tobago. So it is real, it's alive. We know that we traditionally, because of where Trinidad and Tobago is located, that we are considered as one of the transshipment areas. That a lot of times this is one of the areas that people use. I mean, I have been at the United Nations, and it's a matter that is always an issue that is raised, and it is not for want of discussions and interventions, but as a country, as a people, it's something that we have to do. We have to continue to find every possible method to address crime. I did say on the day that I was sworn in as a leader of the opposition that our willingness to work with the government, once good legislation is brought, and I maintain my position, because crime is an issue that impacts on everybody, and I do give my commitment that once good legislation is brought, we will support, and we are also willing to sit with the government, as was done previously under Mr. Manning, to have the kind of discussions, because this is not about opposition and government. This is really about the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
Hi, good morning. Angelo Chitadaya from Guardian Media Limited. Now, you deemed the new taxes and fines as unjustified, right? But the Prime Minister is saying that it was announced in the budget and finance bill, right? However, she says she wants to know if you were aware of, what was happening during Parliament on that particular day. Going forward, how do you respond to the Prime Minister's comments?
Okay, now you, Mr. Imbut, dealt with that extensively.
Yeah, I don't know what
but
her response to you, her response to that, and how she said how you wasn't aware of what happens in Parliament.
Well, the Prime Minister should herself come to Parliament a little more regularly. But I will, since Mr. Imbut wants to, and I will.
Sometimes the questions from the media surprised me. I was very clear. I went through the finance bill.
No, it was
I said
the
there
Prime
were-
Minister.
No, but that may be so. But you should know that she's talking nonsense. Because there are only 4 or 5 adjustments to the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act fines in the finance bill, and very few are mentioned in the budget statement or the budget debate as well. Whereas, seeing virtually every single offense, the fine has been doubled. So you should do your own research and realize it's a nonsensical statement.
Yeah.
Ryan, I thought you're handing it over to other people. I heard that.
As I have you there, you're already on the podium speaking about going back again on the increase in the taxes and the fines.
Since you want to question me, let me just say another point. The statement, this is to you, the statement about a lawless dump was with respect to the traffic fines, not crime, not murders, not robberies, not home invasion. It was about traffic fines. That's the point the Prime Minister made, because the objection was raised about why are you coming like a thief in the night on Christmas Eve and doubling traffic fines. The Prime Minister's response was, Trinidad and Tobago is a lawless dump. That's why they increased the traffic fines. I just wanted to make that point to you. Okay? Right.
All right. Now you did mention a list of the fines. I think you forgot the increase in the births and deaths. The increase the
Ryan,
bond.
I said I could talk for hours.
Yes, I know.
So let's just talk about
I know that. As far as 2026 is coming forward, as a former Minister of Finance, with these taxes, these fines, these kinds of all these new legislation that could come into effect financially for many people. How do you anticipate 2026 to be for people? Given your knowledge of finance, the economic states, and how these things run. And now I pass. That's it.
Well, the question is very confusing, but if you're asking me about the economic outlook for 2026, it's bad. Because they are not going to realize the revenue that they are projecting, because a lot of these fines don't make any sense. They won't collect them. There'll be a lot of evasion, especially with alcohol taxes and so on. And with respect to births and deaths, I'm glad you brought that up. We, as a government, decided to make a number of things free. I, as Minister of Finance, made driver's permit renewals for people over 60 free. Okay, passports free. We made birth certificates free. Okay, so this is a complete reversal. Why would you want to increase the charges for registration of births and deaths? Why? Especially deaths. Somebody is grieving and you have to pay more. So I'll sit down now.
Mr. Imbit, if you don't mind, sir, because you mentioned something earlier now, Jules Brown TV6 News, you mentioned something earlier, and I just wanted your insight. You talked about the landlord business surcharge, as it's called. But in terms of tenants, because obviously if landlords have to pay increases for operating their businesses, then the expectation is that, you know, they may pass that on to tenants.
They will.
And as such,
Because remember, they also have to pay an increased electricity charge, and they have to pay increased customs duties and all that sort of thing. Okay, they have to pay an increased NIS for their employees. This NIS increase is not just on workers, you know, it's on employers as well. So if you have a real estate company, for example, that has a number of properties that it's renting, has a number of employees, you now have to pay an increased amount for your employees. Okay, so they will. It may not happen immediately, it may happen in the next 6 months, but it will certainly cause an increase in rents. That's for sure.
the amendments you anticipate for that legislation?
They have to fix it. It doesn't make any sense. I saw they put something inside of there as a kind of escape clause that the date for registration could be adjusted by the minister by order. They're going to certainly have to do that. They cannot stick with that March 31st deadline for 100,000 rented properties in Trinidad and Tobago, especially with no information, no regulations, no rules, no criteria, nothing. They can't do that. And then it says that if you're 1 day late, because you have to pay by quarter now, it's not every year, you know. It's a very weird tax, you know. Every 3 months, landlords have to pay a tax on the rent they collected for that particular 3 months. If you're 1 day late, they add 5% onto the amount owed, and then they hit you with a 15% per annum increase and so on. So there's no way this thing is going to be implementable in any kind of orderly fashion. I mean, these are crazy people, so they could still do it, but there will be chaos. Okay? All right?
To the opposition leader?
Yeah, I just want to say something. The way the question was asked, the presumption is that every citizen should have known following the debate about those fines. That's what I'm trying to say. If I should be aware, I mean, everybody was listening to the debate. Everybody was listening to the debate, and one of the most important things has to be what is going to happen to the consumer. Because, you know, it's one thing to talk about these fines, but I'm sure you're reading the papers today. I mean, the maxi taxi drivers are now talking about increasing a short drop. Maybe they are not aware of those things. So the reality is we could debate a lot of things and make it sound nice, you know. If you recall the Minister of Finance, every time, promise me, and they're ponging up the desk. I mean, the people of Trinidad and Tobago were not aware about what is the consequences of those taxes. So to come and tell me about I am aware. The Prime Minister missed the whole debate, the whole budget debate. She came at the end and talk about this is the first Prime Minister in the history and making some kind. You missed the whole debate. You weren't aware, and the reason why all of this is happening now, and she's surprised. I mean, the budget finished. You come to make things in a finance committee and tell me. I was there for the whole thing. Yes.
All right, and well, we were talking about the debate, and she also went on to say and have some criticism out there that says that if the debate didn't end prematurely, that it would have come out even more and had more vocal.
Listen, that is even worse. That is even worse. I mean, listen. The majority of the senior ministers of government did not say a word. Minister of Works, nothing. Minister of Health, nothing. National Security, Public Utilities, Defense, nothing. We're talking about ending. They end the debate. They are the government. If you are the government, you have the responsibility when you are there in the parliament to say to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, what is the budget about? People shouldn't be, you shouldn't be getting no surprise about, your light ain't working. And I mean, all sorts of ridiculous. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And the point about it is just pure incompetence. And they will not want to throw it on the shoulders of the opposition to tell us we should be aware. You said in your speech you're going to commune, you're going to talk to the people, and you're afraid to talk to the press. When last has the Prime Minister done like me? Stand up, come and talk to the press. Ask your question, take your questions. It can't be that you just press release. Come and talk to the people. That's not happening. So don't come and tell me what I am aware and I wasn't there. You were not there. You are the one who not aware of what is going on. You are the one who is very clear that if you can get a downgrade, 2 downgrades in 3 months, I mean, what it is they're doing, they met a government properly functioning. Whatever you say about Mr. Imbert, every month people get their salary on time. You know what it is to be a pensioner? You go in the bank, I mean, you take your card, you put in the card, no money. You come back, you go in, I mean, no money. People on social welfare, disability, no money. And they're giving you all kinds of excuses as to why they cannot pay people's salaries on time. I wonder if she's aware of that.
Right, and just transitioning, we want to get your thoughts and maybe Dr. Brown's thoughts as well on the recently announced migrants expansion policy. Any thoughts on that? That was put forward yesterday.
Well, what specifically on the policy?
Really, the concerns, what happens when it ends in September 26, when the paperwork expires?
Well, I mean, it is for the government to be clear. I mean, I have taken note of the fact that they have taken a position that persons who are here illegally and so that they are dealing with that. I mean, that's a government right. But we, as a government, put things in place to allow the Venezuelans who were minded to work here legally, that you had a proper procedure to follow. And I mean, a number of countries take that position. I would suspect that a lot of what is going on now would probably be related to the fact that Venezuela has declared her persona non grata. Yes.
Just seeking some clarification,
Sure.
Opposition Leader.
Sure.
In terms of the state of emergency, the extension that exists now, when that ends, if it's end of January, early February, can there be another extension, but would that have to involve the vote of members of the Senate?
Well, I mean, I don't know that I would want to give my answer to that, because that we are waiting patiently to hear what the government is going to do. So I'm not going to say exactly what it is supposed to be done, because that is the government's responsibility. But whatever happens, if something comes to the parliament as a responsible opposition, we will do what we believe is in the best interests of the country.
And the follow-up to that in terms of Carnival, because
Yes.
you express, of course, your concerns.
Yeah.
I've been hearing from persons in the Carnival sector some of their concerns as well. But in terms of that, in the context of Carnival being a major foreign exchange earner, what are your expectations in terms of Carnival 2026?
Well, with this government, it's very difficult to say. I mean, you have the state of emergency. You have restrictions already. You know, people who have said certain things on social media, people are behind bars. So we understand what Carnival is about. We understand what Calypso is about. So we are waiting very patiently. Carnival is 6 weeks away. This is one of the earliest carnivals we have had in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. So normally, I'm sure you're aware, you would have lots of fets. Things will be busy. Nothing like that happening. I mean, everything is off, right? I mean, this weekend coming up, you will sure to hear of a lot of fets. You know, and the Prime Minister, in her dictatorial style, has been sending clear messages to people: no fet here, no fet here. The traditional position of consultation with the public doesn't exist. And for the people of Trinidad and Tobago who understand what Carnival means to us, I think it is very unfortunate that this government has taken the position that it is not a matter that they are giving priority. If they were giving priority, they would have in some way addressed it. And we heard the Minister of Culture say that this is going to be a bumper carnival. We waiting?
When you hear it seems that the government's positioning, this is on another matter, concerning the fines and so on,
Yeah.
the traffic fines, that if persons just do what they're supposed to do, then they shouldn't have an issue. I've heard, of course, members of the opposition put that in your response in the context of the present state of the economy, the number of persons who are still seeking employment, etc. How do you respond to that particular, if that's the position of the government?
Well, let me just say this. I want to make it abundantly clear that we are not saying that people should do wrong things. We are not saying, and I'm sure that's not what the Member of Parliament for MOVA said, that, you should do wrong things. But, I mean, I'm a lawyer, I'm a practicing lawyer, and these issues of traffic fines, it is an important one, but it cannot be that you want to use that for revenue generation, right? Because you have a choice. You have a choice when you decide to tax what you want to tax on, right? So we have to link that to the Prime Minister making a very clear statement. When I get back into office, I am going to reduce the traffic fines. So having said that, you're coming to say, I'm not aware. But she seems to have forgotten that she told the public she's going to reduce the traffic fines. She was critical of the government as it relates to the demerit system, because we were saying, listen, you don't want to say culturally, but as it relates to driving, I mean, we do know that sometimes there are some of us who are not as conscious as we should be about driving. So you also have to, you have to deal with people's changes, people's attitude. That's why you have Arrive Alive. So as you go to the court, I don't know if you're aware, some people tell you that they put aside their money for the PBR. They put aside. So there are some people who have developed the attitude of being comfortable breaking a breaking a traffic light and doing the wrong things. Now, yes, you can find ways and means of dealing with those persons. You take away a license, all sorts of things that you could do. And that is why we brought in the demerit point system, which was working and which gave Trinidad and Tobago a good credit rating. This government, who, as Mr. Imbert said, you cannot tax people into prosperity. You see, you go to the public and you say, no more taxes. You go to the public and say, no property tax. Now you put the oil at $70+, right? And where are you getting the revenue? The only way you could get the revenue is to find a way to be creative and tax people and then call people a lawless dump. That's a challenge. Yes?
One other point,
Sure.
as more of a foreign policy issue,
Yeah.
we've seen the reports coming out of the United States that it seems to be that there may have been some activity by whichever part of the U.S. military or CIA or whatnot in Venezuela in terms of a port in particular. Any particular concern about that in the context of the government of Trinidad and Tobago's strong support, the present government, strong support for the U.S. military presence in the Caribbean, and their support for what the U.S. has been saying is its war on drug cartels, even though the U.S. forces have also been seizing oil tankers recently?
Well, we go back to what we would have been told months ago. We go back to the statement of the Honorable Prime Minister at the United Nations, making it very clear that this region is not a zone of peace. We also would recall that the clear messaging had to do with narco trafficking. That is what we were told. But as things develop and you get further explanations, and that's why I came back to the radar, and the suggestion made by the Prime Minister that the People's National Movement is some way involved with some kind of narco trafficking and finances as it relates to drugs, and to give the impression to the public that we are not in support of the United States and all of that. All of those things are linked together, which they give you in little pieces. But the truth is that We know that at least a Trinidadian was killed. We also know that from the evidence of the United States, especially the last one, last vessel or one of the vessels that were blown up, that one of the persons clearly was calling for help, and there appeared to be no evidence of drugs. We are saying that it is very important that when these statements are made, you're talking about international law, we are talking about our region being a zone of peace, and we are also saying that there should be clear evidence. And it cannot be a case where these activities are taking place or where somebody is on a vessel and there's absolutely no evidence as to whether drugs were on the vessel. And you would see Congress and many other persons and many other countries are raising the identical issue. And I don't know, Emery, if you wish to add anything. Sure.
Thank you. Jewel, it's difficult to say it any better than the leader of the opposition just said it. But just to remind that Trinidad and Tobago is a state party to the International Criminal Court. In fact, this country was part of the inspiration for the founding of the court itself. There are some countries in this world that are not state parties, including the United States of America. So when you talk about international law and the UN Charter and its application here, Trinidad and Tobago and the leader of Trinidad and Tobago has to be much more circumspect than she has been thus far. So going right back to those reactions of kill them all violently, even the threat of nuclear attack by proxy from an Indian weapon of mass destruction on Caracas, which was made by a government minister of Trinidad and Tobago. Those represent clear violations of international law and the UN Charter, which prohibits the use of force or the threat of use of force against a sovereign nation. That's what that was. So we make light of it. It becomes a subject of jokes. But these are serious matters when they come from a prime minister and a cabinet. So the question was formulated, I don't know if it was approved in the parliament, when the prime minister said that, kill them all violently. On what basis did she make that statement? Because she speaks on behalf of a sovereign republic. And did she seek the opinion and advice of the legal advisor to the cabinet, the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago, before committing this country in such a way? And those words remain on the record. And that's why she's so angry with Gaston Brown and other leaders, where she waited months after they made a very clear position in support of the zone of peace. And when there were some recent challenges with the visa policy of the U.S. vis-a-vis Antigua and Barbuda, she has come around and imported that grouse that she had when they did not, as she views it, support her in her attack on the zone of peace, and has tried to marry the two issues and to say it's because Antigua was bad-talking the United States of America. That's why they're having visa challenges. So these things are all connected. But just to reinforce the point being made about the radar, on one hand, there's the claim that this radar is all-seeing and all-powerful and can find a dinghy in the Caroni Swamp from Crown Point in Tobago. But now the Prime Minister is seeking to recoil and to say that Trinidad and Tobago is in no way associated or contributing to the attacks and strikes that may have been initiated or may occur in the future. That's a very strange and bizarre position, particularly when she has not been transparent with respect to this radar that we are aware of. Are there any other radars? Who's receiving the data? Who is managing the data? And how is it being applied to our lives and the lives of Venezuelans, Americans, or anyone else that we should be concerned about? So there's a lot of mystery there, a lot of disquiet, a lot of inconsistency, and at the end of the day, clear incompatibility with international law. Trinidad and Tobago has never been put in this position before by any prime minister in our history.
Can I go
I
ahead?
know
Yeah.
we are wrapping up, and I'm going to hand back to Hans, but I want to take the opportunity to say special thanks to several members of the media who's here with us and who has been here with us over the last couple months when we have held our media conferences. I want to say, as the opposition leader, on behalf of the entire opposition, to say thank you for your presence, thank you for your support. I'll use the opportunity as I'm here to also wish you the best for 2020. And I hope you have been very good so that at least Santa may or may not have given you a present. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leader, and thank you to all members of the media for being here. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year on behalf of the Leader of the Opposition and the Office of the Opposition Leader of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you.
That's the problem. You see that? That's the problem. Bring the next one. Bring the next one from the next one. The next one. What's your other handle?
The news.
The mic? Somebody going with it or? Joel. Hey. With the mic handle.
I put everything on top of your laptop.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Nice idea. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Unlike other people. What the next one? Give me the next one. Give me the next sound.
The next clip.
One, two, two, two. Hey, come. So you know where he good? One, two, one, two, one, two, one, two, one, two. You reading it? 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. This audio. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. I go straight down in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it can't go straight down in here,
Yeah, yeah.
All right, good.